Hey CD, what's going on? I've been stuck for weeks. The videos I want to make are all long-term projects and I don't know what to do for the next video. New Has-Been Hotel? Okay, I'll put that on the list, but the Plex server needs a new disk drive before I can get to that. Well, Nom Nom Nami released a new game recently. Senbei. Nothing kicks me out of not knowing what to do for the next video, quite like my favorite indie dev dropping a new game out of the blue. I'd actually been following the development of this one, as Nom Nom Nami had been posting frequently on her website and Pillow Fort during the 2-month development. And during that time, oh god, they went feral, like this was the most unhinged I'd ever seen anyone get. Night with Timber is an 18+ game whose itch.io page bills it as the game where Timber fucks you. And then you scroll down to the content warnings and police brutality. Sexually charged torch, genocide? What the hell happened here? You know, I've noticed that there's a stark contrast between the courteousness of a game developer and how dark their game actually is. If a dark game goes, man, this is so dark, it's not for the normies or the Puritans, you know you're in for the video game equivalent of a 13-year-old making their first dead baby joke. When a developer lists out every topic and goes, hey, this game gets pretty uncomfortable, so please take care of yourself, you know you're in for a world of pain and suffering. Okay, so a little backstory on Timber. In Lonely Wolf Treat, there are 3 bad end routes that the players can take in chapters 1, 3, and 6 that involves the main characters crossing paths with the game's villainous characters, Timber, Momxi, and Senbei. Timber is the leader of the Glaze Wolf Pack and features prominently in chapter 1's bad ending. Glaze is the pack that Treat's pack used to belong to until Treat's parents took her and a bunch of other kids and left. You actually meet one of the Glaze wolves in Syrup, as it's the wolf that Butterscotch turns pink. Glaze has a reputation for hunting. Timber denies this and claims his pack actually scavenges, which means to feast off the corpses that the mountain claims. But it's made abundantly clear through this route that Timber is actually killing rabbits and leaving the corpses for his pack to find. Chapter 1's bad ending concludes with Juju about to kill Treat, Timber killing Juju in retaliation, and then gaslighting Treat into thinking she did it. Given that the game is about the way in which rabbits are wrong to be so hateful toward wolves, it's a pretty grim ending for poor Treat. Timber became well liked by the fandom for the same reason a character like Astarion or Andrew would be well liked, only I'd argue that Timber is better written than both. So it was only inevitable that Timber would get his own game, and thus Night with Timber was made. When it was first announced, I'll admit I cocked an ear at the idea of a game all about Timber. I get that he was popular, but nothing about him struck me as especially interesting. I mean, yeah, he's a killer with a Freudian excuse, and that's about it. I don't really see how you can wring even a joke game out of I'm going to kill that wascally wabbit. Starting up the game, you choose your character's name and choose their race and play out a scenario with them. If you try to name yourself after an existing character, the game yells at you. I tried Periwinkle because, let's be honest, who else would be down to fuck Timber? And the game yelled at me to stop this. Oh, I'm sorry, Nami. Given everything else in this game, I didn't think a little twink roughhousing was off limits. Although the script for that is extremely easy to edit, become ungovernable. The first run-through, you're playing as a rabbit, and shockingly, Timber isn't interested in fucking you, though you could say this is the route where he eats your ass. The first route for the rabbit involves fleeing from Timber and scampering up a tree. What follows is a stalemate as Timber taunts them with dropped items. The rabbit, who incidentally I went with the default name of Tofu, stays up there the entire night as Timber waits at the bottom of the tree. By morning, Tofu thinks Timber has fallen asleep and tries to climb down, only to slip and break their neck. The second route involves another rabbit, who incidentally I named Mr. Freeze, scurrying into a cave trying to get into a deep and tightly packed cavern where Timber can't fit through to reach them. Timber tries to coax them out with their water bottle, but Mr. Freeze keeps going until they're deep where no wolf can reach them, and it turns out they're standing on ice, which breaks, and they drop into the freezing cold water and drown. Okay, this one's just fucking horrifying. Like, dying in a cave is the worst possible way to die, especially since it's unlikely Mr. Freeze will ever be found. That cave could easily be their tomb. The last route has one more rabbit, who incidentally I named Plunge, abandoning any attempt to hide and simply running for it. Timber chases after them, talking about trying to give them back their missing lighter, but Plunge won't listen. This leads to nearly running off a cliff, only for Timber to catch up and push them the rest of the way. This is the same way Timber kills Boreas and Juju in Lonely Wolf Treat, by engineering circumstances to push them over a cliff. Strangely enough, nearly all 3 deaths for all 3 rabbits are self-inflicted. Climbs the tree and dies trying to get down, they dive into a cave and drown, and fleeing from Timber at night while panicking causes them to nearly run off the edge of a cliff. All Timber has to do is give a little push in the wrong direction. Timber ends up killing the rabbits largely by exploiting their fear of wolves. It leads you to wonder what would happen if someone didn't run from Timber. The epilogue has Timber taking the rabbit that fell from the tree back to Glaze, where Tundra praises him for a job well done and goes to skin it. Then you get the human or witch key. The witch and human routes are basically the same, albeit with a few small differences for the witch. However, it's implied that every character except for the rabbit comes from the witch town at the bottom of the mountain. And there's only one actual human who lives in that town, so like, who is this bitch? Anyway, the witch, who incidentally I named Periwinkle because you can't stop me, is camping on Mount Sorbet when they encounter Timber, who gives them back their wallet. Then you can take shelter in a cave or head back to your tent, where 3 possible endings can take place. 1, you don't interact with Timber much and he robs you the next morning. 2, you can have dinner with Timber and come away with a better understanding of wolves and a deeper appreciation for other ways of life. Or 3, you can flirt like crazy with Timber out of the gate and fuck him, and then he robs you the next morning. There is something very funny about the way Timber robs a human or witch player in 2 endings. Of the 2, the interesting one is the second one, New Light. Being a witch, who are in the highest position of privilege in society, Perry had all the same beliefs that the rabbits do about wolves, just the fortitude not to panic in a heated situation. Instead of hunting Perry, because animal folk are actually sensitive to magic, Timber helps him back to his camp with the intention of stealing his rations. That does happen in 2 out of 3 endings, but in New Light, Perry instead asks Timber about Glaze, and Timber opens up a bit about how Glaze is secretive and doesn't like to share its location because rabbits and witches used to kill wolves. Glaze, a pack which used to have 100 wolves, has been whittled down to about a dozen. Timber ends up being so courteous and kind to a complete stranger that it causes Perry to reevaluate everything he'd been led to believe. It's not a significant change, but Perry does end up giving Timber the rest of his rations to feed his pack, and they part ways as new friends. The epilogue reveals that the witch was actually Plum, a minor character from Lowly Wolf Tree, and in fact this epilogue shows that every route is canonical, with the game taking place over at least a few years. Plum was so affected by his encounter with Timber that he became a member of a traders guild, and is one of the few merchants who's willing to trade with wolves. Timber doesn't remember him because he meets a lot of people when he's out hunting, which is funny. Once you unlock the New Light ending, you get the Wolf Key, which is important because it's in New Light where Timber reveals how difficult life is on the mountain. The game's progress is dependent on specific endings, each of which adds new information that recontextualizes the behavior of Timber and his pack. In the Rabbit route, you're shown Timber hunting. In the Witch route, you're shown that the power dynamics in this world don't actually favor the wolves. But in the Wolf route, in the wolf route, Timber has a conspicuous set of bandages, and despite chasing you, upon realizing you're a wolf, who incidentally I named Mange, becomes immediately friendly, claiming wolves ought to stick together. Though before this, Timber was often presented as a villain, he's one who cares for his own very deep, and his hunting is done to feed his family in a place where food is increasingly scarce. The wolf route is the only one where Timber brings you back to Glaze. It's here that you can learn about his pack, speak to his mother, and learn about the situation the wolves are facing. The wolves in Glaze are actually quite delightful, especially Juniper. He's so helpful. It's a stark contrast from the perception of wolves you get as a rabbit. The mountain used to be a good place to live, but then the rabbits settled in frosting. They cut down trees to build their houses and overforaged to the point that nothing could grow back. In Timber's words, they'll take whatever they want, and they'll keep taking until nothing's left. Staying the night with Timber can turn into a raunchy sex scene, or something a lot more tender. And I think it's interesting that the story only progresses if Mange chooses the latter. Could have been easy to just not do that, but I like that in order to get the story to move forward, Mange has to treat Timber like a person, and not a sex object. I know that sounds like the faintest praise imaginable, but you'd be surprised how few games figure this out. Like, just off memory, it's this and a Baldur's Gate 2 mod, and that's it. Like, I always like the way Nami approaches sex in her games because it's always in a very mature, nonchalant kind of way. If you just want to fuck the dog and give her a go, you can, but you can also do something a lot more interesting. Timber starts talking about the scarf Mange is wearing, and eventually they explain that it's a scar from a childhood injury. When they were a child, a witch declared them their familiar, and then slapped a collar on them and yanked them around the playground until it cut into their neck. Mange starts downplaying what happened to them, but Timber cuts them off, saying that it's terrible that happened to them. No downplaying, no oppression Olympics, just sympathy for another wolf going through hardship. This leads to making out with Timber, but then Mange touches Timber's neck, and that's when everything comes grinding to a halt. Timber's neck has been bandaged with the entirety of the wolf route, implying something happened to him. Oh, and we're gonna find out soon. Timber doesn't want to talk about what happened, but he does eventually relent and remove his bandages. There is a grisly burn mark on his neck. It's also from a collar, but not like Mange's. Timber was snatched up by what he describes as some real sadists. Though it's healed, it messes with Timber's head. Mange relates to Timber on the basis that looking at their scar is an ever-permanent reminder of what happened to them. It's in this sense that scars are especially potent in both storytelling and psychology. A scar is like a folded down page of your life, always there as a reminder of past events in a way that makes it harder to let memory distance itself over time. Even when that page is folded back, it's still always just a little bent. You never get to truly forget where you folded it down. It's a sobering experience, as long after a traumatic experience has passed, you're still being reminded of it in a way that is different from any other memory. All this leads to something very tender with Timber, in a way I wasn't expecting from this game of all things. But on reflection, I should have been expecting. It's a Nami game. No matter how silly the premise, it's going to get heavy. The next morning, Mange has made a decision. They're going to stay in Glaze. They'll return home, pack up their things, get their affairs in order, and then they're going to stay in Glaze with Timber. Timber is cautious about this, not wanting anyone else to live in this kind of extreme poverty, and not wanting Mange to regret it. It's in that moment Mange decides that it's about time they get rid of this old name, so they choose to go by Twigs. Aw, Timber and Twigs. Cute. I ship it. This is the closest thing to a positive ending this game really has. Timber has genuinely improved the life of another person, where usually when he shows up, he does the opposite. The epilogue is especially heartwarming, as Twigs finally makes the move to Glaze, having packed up their clothes, but also, like, just a fucking ton of rice. A crazy amount of rice. Like, this is enough food to feed the pack for several months. And when Timber sees it, he's just taken aback by how lucky he is that he ran into Twigs. Given everything Timber's been through, he really needed that win. Things might just be looking up for once. Now, I know what you're thinking. How did Timber get that nasty scar on his neck? Well, now it's time for the Captor Route. Warning, the rest of this video deals with some very uncomfortable material, including sexually charged violence, torture, police brutality, starvation, ethnic cleansing, and sexual abuse. The Captor Route begins with Osmanthus, a witch cop, ensnaring Timber in a trap and dragging him to Frosting. There, he brings Timber to Senbei. They both bring Timber down into the basement of his house and tie him up to some gym equipment and finally tell him why he's there. Rabbits have been going missing, and they want to beat a confession out of Timber so that they can make the wolves a scapegoat for it, and finally get the pull they need to enact legislation to exterminate them for good. Osmanthus is operating completely off the books. Full corruption. It's actually implied the police harass animal folk with regularity, as Osmanthus appears in Syrup 2 doing the same thing to Toffee and Syrup. Timber takes all of this in good humor, as one thing he's always been good at is maintaining control of a situation by smirking through almost everything. Irreverence is the preferred way of a lot of people to try and mask their real feelings, from the traumatized to internet trolls. It's an effective tactic, and Timber uses it to drive Senbei up the wall later in the game, but it's also used as an effective narrative trick. See, you have to play this from Osmanthus' point of view first, and he leaves after locking Timber up and giving Senbei a shock collar and comes back after 3 days to collect him. In that time, Timber has gone from quipping and bitterly snapping at the mention of the violence against his family to nothing. The shock collar is shattered, he's bleeding, and he's completely catatonic. Oz is understandably freaking out. He can't have this guy die here because he can't cover his ass for that. This shows that while Oz is a complete fucking monster who deserves the beating that Syrup and Toffee are about to give him, Senbei is on a whole other level. Timber doesn't say anything until Senbei talks Osmanthus into giving him another 3 days, at which point he breaks. This prompts a very simple question. What the fuck happened here? After completing Osmanthus' route, you can do it over again from Senbei's point of view. Here, Timber is locked up and pressed for information while being subjected to a number of different torture tactics. Electrocution, beating, molestation, humiliation, starvation. Even the way he's locked up is designed to cause pain the longer he remains in that position. Throughout the entire process, Timber routinely gets control of the conversation from Senbei, who keeps talking as if he's some kind of master of interrogation, yet keeps losing control to Timber. So the nauseating aspect of the torture is balmed slightly by Timber's continuing banter. Oh, hey there, Nami, why have you got a hold of the rug I'm standing on? Now, Senbei is an unusual character. He's the closest the Syrupverse has to a villain, unless you count Lilium. As of Syrup 2, there's also Pastilla, but she's kind of vinegared herself. Senbei is a straight-up fascist who came to Frosting because he was fascinated by its violent history. Frosting was established when a group of rabbits were trying to get away from the expensive and overcrowded rabbit cities, and so settled on Mount Sorbet, where they proceeded to commit ethnic cleansing against the wolves there. Wolves had already been living on the very fringes of society out of a misplaced belief that they were dangerous, so it wasn't difficult for the rabbits to fabricate a justification for their violence. In Lonely Wolf Treat, Mochi can discover the truth about Frosting in the basement of the Warren, a score of taxidermied corpses kept on display like works of art. If you're noticing parallels to the colonization of America or the Nakba, you're not wrong to notice those things. Rabbits are colonialist and they behave like colonists, so they will inevitably draw comparison to colonization. This is a better use of simile than animal races and metaphors usually use. Take something like Zootopia, which uses traditional predator-prey dynamics but establishes that at some point predators had been dangerous, but prey currently hold all the power. The Syrupverse does the opposite. The scapegoat is never violent without justifiable reason, and it's the ones higher up on the position of power who are doing the violence, just like in real life. This part reveals an interesting fact about Timber. At the middle point, Senbei feeds him, and Timber jokes about it being underseasoned, at which point Senbei takes the food away, intending to throw it out, and Timber screams at him not to waste it because something died to be on that plate. As was mentioned before, the rabbits who have gone missing never have any remains. When Timber hunts something, the pack makes use of the entire entire corpse, even the bones. Nothing about a kill is wasted, and the way Timber talks makes it clear that if he has to resort to killing, he insists on making the most of it. This is interesting because this is a part of actual real-world cultures. A lot of cultures, mostly indigenous people, make use of the entirety of a kill, or at least as much of it as they can. The meat and organs for food, the hides for clothing and shelter, fat for cooking and tanning hides, tendons and sinew could make thread, and most famously bowstrings, and bones could be fashioned into all kinds of tools. The reason this is done is because they don't kill for sport and had a tremendous respect for life, so when they killed animals, they took great care to use as much as possible. Doing anything else would have been disrespectful to an animal whose life had to be taken so you could eat. It would be ungrateful. It's also why an image like this is so chilling. Colonists slaughtered bison en masse to deprive indigenous people of vital resources and corral them into reservations where they could be controlled. It's an act of colonial violence, but even in the more petty sense, it's an open display of wanton hostility and disrespect. This is reflected in the way Timber talks about the rabbits. They just eat everything. They overforage, they pull up plants, they are wasteful to an extreme degree, like any colonizer would be. Senbei sees other living beings as so beneath him, he'll kill them and throw the corpse in the trash. An act that is so insulting to Timber, he actually drops his smug attitude and spits venom at him. This is a man who has to kill so his family can survive. Conversely, Frosting stuffs the bodies of the wolves they've murdered and put them on display. It's not just that Frosting is irrationally violent, it's that they're proud of it. Their violence toward wolves is glorified. They celebrate it. In Lonely Wolf Tree, Mochi can find a journal detailing the murder of Timber's father, and they don't even hide that they were the aggressor. That's how proud of this they are. This isn't even that unrealistic. Colonialist states have a history of glorifying their own violence to a degree that can seem cartoonishly evil. I mean, sure, your country may have a gruesome history, but at least you're not the guys who pulled up lawn chairs and beer to watch civilians get bombed like it was an episode of Deadliest Warrior. When Senbei doesn't get anywhere as the 3 days are drawing to a close, he simply keeps the shock collar activated until it explodes. When Oz comes to collect Timber, the same scene from before plays out and Senbei weasels another 3 days out of him. This time, Timber's bite is gone. He's just broken. He sits there, saying nothing for most of the next 3 days, and the only time he does speak is to lament the cruel circumstances where he gets to use a shower for the 3rd time in his life. Earlier in the Witch Route, it's possible to let Timber use your shower, which is practically a luxury for a wolf from Glaze. It's one of the more light-hearted and, dare I say, cute moments in the game. And then it gets 180'd here, like Nami luring you in with a cupcake before smashing a beer bottle over your head. The banter from Timber in the first half had the effect of blunting the torture. Now that it's gone, you only have the clear and obvious situation of someone with power abusing someone without power, and talking about it like it's a game. The cold, almost boring sociopathy providing nothing that could be viewed as entertaining. It's just bleak. It's a moment that makes you realize this kind of banter is there for the comfort of the viewer, to blunt the gruesomeness of what's going on so people don't have to think too hard about it. But more important, as I'm fond of saying, torment and torture is boring. Senbei's line of thinking is just so typical. You probably met a guy like this, an ambitious idiot who thinks himself a high intellectual, yet flounders the instant he's put into any conversation with any person ever. Senbei's insecurities and his delusions become so dreary to parse. I feel like I'm locked in a room with J.D. Vance or Anthony Grimaglia, just the most mind-numbingly boring kind of loser. The epilogue is a twofer. The first has Timber make it home where Tundra treats his injuries. Rather tellingly, Timber wants to put an end to the scavenging because it's now become way too dangerous. Tundra points out that doing so would only be letting the pack starve. Timber's looking for a way out where there is none, desperate for a better solution where one can't be found. The second has him in recovery for several weeks until eventually the other wolves pull him out of bed to rejoin them, Pine having taken over the cooking and managing the pack while he was recovering. None of them know the details, but they all knew something was wrong. That's probably the worst part of this. Timber can't really confide in anyone. Nobody knows what's really going on with the pack. Only he and Tundra do. But maybe that could change. The final route, the Black Rabbit, is exactly what it sounds like. A year after being released, when Timber goes out hunting again, he finds Senbei. Senbei has gone completely rabid, and Timber takes one look at him and flees. Senbei gives chase, talking about all the evidence he's found against Timber, none of which actually proves his guilt. And so in the face of repeated failures that looked on the surface like progress, he breaks and chases Timber down himself. The chase leads them to the cliffs, where after admitting he didn't find any concrete proof, Timber just throws his hands up and asks why he's even bothering with this. There's something uncomfortably close to home about the sheer exasperation of being pursued by someone convinced of your guilt yet continuously unable to find proof of it. It's like just Give up and go home, you fucking loser. Senbei has an unusual gambit. He wants Timber to try and kill him, and even tries to convince him to do it by saying that if he does, the only person convinced of his guilt will be gone. Now, this is why Senbei is a moron, because, like, why would you say that? Obviously, he has some kind of trap card. He wouldn't be suggesting otherwise if he did. That's like when fascists say that counter-protests play into their hands. If that were true, you wouldn't be telling them that. Then again, Senbei is crazy. Timber obviously isn't going to do it because come the fuck on. Why would you listen to your stalker? He even hits Senbei right where it hurts, that for all his political aspirations, all the theory he reads, and all that time spent in his gym, he still relied on others' magic to do all of this. Senbei has such delusions of grandeur, such desires for power and influence, but at the end of the day, he's still animal folk in a world where witches have all the real power. The rabbits may have created their own little hierarchy on the mountain, but it's just a small piece of a hierarchy that already exists. So Senbei snaps. He lifts Timber by the throat and dangles him over a cliff. You had worried before about what you would do if you were to lay your hands on him. What you didn't know is that it would feel this good. Senbei's that intersection between a despicable monster and a pathetic little loser. Though really, what is a monster if not just a loser with power? And even here, dangling over a cliff, Timber knows that all he has to do is grin and it'll be crawling at him. That's when Timber finally kicks him, sending himself into the lake at the bottom of the cliff, presumably to his death, but Timber's craftier than that and manages to get away. Senbei returns home, clutching Twigs' knife. Earlier he mentioned there were spells to trace the owners of objects, meaning Senbei now has a link to find Twigs, acting as the perfect hook for his sequel. Aw, poor Syrup, your game's never getting finished at this rate. The epilogue happens just afterward, when Twigs finds Timber limping home in wolf form. Twigs and Tundra bring him inside and wrap him up to keep him warm. The next morning, Timber wakes up looking for his coat. He was sure he brought it back with him. He didn't want Senbei to get it. Lord knows he'd be in his basement sniffing it. After learning his coat is fine, Tundra tries multiple different tactics to get Twigs to leave the room, only for Timber to protest. Twigs is getting the impression that there's more going on than just an accident and stays by Timber's side the entire day, while Timber gives a story about a fishing accident to the rest of his pack. That evening, Twigs suggests they get a job so they can buy food for the pack to solve their hunger problem. Timber doesn't like that because it means Twigs will be gone all the time, and rather pitifully asks Twigs not to leave. Tundra comes back in and tries to shoo Twigs away so that she could talk to Timber, but Timber doesn't allow it, insisting Twigs hear whatever Tundra has to say. So they discuss what happened, and Timber tells the truth that Senbei was waiting for him, reiterating to Tundra that this was why he didn't want to go out there, losing it on Tundra for the first time on screen. The trust between Timber and Tundra is very clearly broken, which is why Timber clutches to Twigs so much. Twigs asks Timber to explain what's going on, but Timber doesn't want to, afraid that Twigs will hate him. But Twigs keeps pushing, so he confesses. He tells Twigs that not only was Senbei out looking for him, trying to get him to confess to the murders, but that he was right. Timber confesses to Twigs that he's been killing rabbits to feed the pack, and not just to feed them, but because he enjoyed it. The shit I've done for this pack. It's mostly for the meat, but I hate him too. So sometimes I go out and see if I can goad him into dying for me. I'm not gonna make excuses. I used to think it was fun using their own fear against them. And the only reason it stopped being fun is because I got caught. And they gave me this scar. And I've been scared every time I've gone out scavenging since. This gives us an explanation for why Timber always chases his prey until the mountain kills them for him. Every rabbit hunted in the first route ended up dying as a result of their own panic. Their own fear plays a big part in getting them killed. It's a beautifully ironic way to take revenge on one's oppressor. But more importantly, yeah, it's completely understandable that Timber would hate the rabbits. Tundra confesses the same feelings in the art gallery, that the rabbits' violence was so severe and so brutal that it's hard to even see them as human. Scavenging may be a way to feed the pack, but it's also an act of resistance, making certain the mountain is never completely safe for those who decided to take everything for themselves. Twigs confesses that they don't hate Timber and wonders if that makes them a bad person. Timber tries to reassure them, but that thought doesn't leave their head. No matter what he's done, you can't help but love him. That's just the kind of horrible, awful person you are. You'll need to learn everything about this. You'll ask your questions little by little, and you'll make sure he answers honestly. The more you know, the better you'll be able to protect him, so that nothing bad ever happens to him again. That's probably the best way for you to be happy, as two wolves who are just making the best of what they've got. That's all there is to it. Despite everything, you sleep comfortably in his arms that night. In the course of a single game, Timber went from a character I never really had any strong feelings one way or another about, to being one of my favorites. It even gave me a model example to point to regarding other stories of oppressed minorities supposedly going too far in their response to their oppression. Timber's actions are bad, and he makes no attempt to deny that fact, and the game is fundamentally about a serial killer getting away with his crimes, but it doesn't ever pretend to not be firmly on Timber's side. You're not just shown Timber's crimes, you're shown why the pack has to resort to it, and why Timber would come to take catharsis out of it. It's extremely hard to take Timber seriously as a villainous character because he doesn't possess any actual power. Wolves in the Syrupverse are one of the most minoritized groups. They exist entirely on the fringes of society, living in mobile shanty towns, surviving off scraps from the witches. In fact, it's heavily implied that the witches themselves started many of the rumors about wolves to create infighting and privileged classes among animal folk. It's extremely difficult to take any member of a minoritized group seriously as a villain when directly contrasted with the ones who have all the power. It's the same problem with villains like the White Fang or the Equalists. Timber only works as a villain in terms of what he does emotionally to Tree, gaslighting her and manipulating her to go along with things that a soft-hearted girl like her would never want to do. But in nearly every other context, he's just a guy. Timber and Senbei contrast each other very well in this regard because Timber's reasons for resorting to evil are entirely external. His pack is starving, his species is on the verge of extinction, and he cares about his family too much to let silly little things like ethics get in the way of providing for them. Timber puts himself in danger entirely so nobody else has to. This is a big part of why Senbei can't get him to cooperate, because what Senbei is ultimately offering him is a chance to save his own neck while the rabbits get an excuse to wipe out the rest of the wolves. But Timber would rather put himself in danger to spare the others because he loves them so much. Senbei can't comprehend this because he's so internally focused. So focused on power and influence, but more importantly, so woefully insecure about his lack of either. I hadn't noticed it until I sat down to write this, but there's a bit in the torture route where Senbei just sits there pretending to read a book, hoping to lull Timber into a false sense of security. Timber later identifies it as a book on political theory, but isn't it weird that he's just pretending to read it? Even if he's just doing this as a part of his torture of Timber, you'd think you'd just read it anyway. Senbei only brought this book down to signal to Timber that he's an intellectual, but he's never actually read any of the political theory books he owns. He just pretends to. He collects these books so that they can sit on his bookshelf as a sign to any who visit. He's never read an ounce of political theory in his life. Everything about Senbei reeks of both overcompensation and insecurity. Timber can read him like a book after just 3 days. Senbei has a high-class witch parent, but no power of his own. In the Syrupverse, witches have carved out a comfortable position of power and passed around a lot of myths and nonsense about prey-predator dynamics so that animal folk are too busy fighting amongst themselves to realize who actually owns them. And animal folk exist in their own hierarchy based on their perceived friendliness and proximity to witches.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
Senbei may have a witch for a parent, but since he's a rabbit, that means he doesn't get to have the level of power and influence a witch has, and that bothers him. So Frosting, a town where rabbits carved themselves their own personal hierarchy, is attractive to him. Achieving power through political means is attractive to him, but he refuses to actually do the work. He pretends to read political theory so others will think highly of him, but even if he did, any idiot could tell you theory ends where practice begins. Timber reads that out himself, that intellectual shit. It starts to turn impractical the more abstract you get. Makes you think everyone else is stupid for not knowing what the hell you're talking about. I mean, look, looking smart is easy. You just say something like, hey, have you read Markina Yakovna's theory of conceptual realism? And if they don't immediately call out that you made that up, you can say whatever the fuck you want from a position of authority. People will go along with a lot of shit if it just sounds smart. But Senbei isn't. Oftentimes in the torture route, he fails to get what he wants out of Timber because he specifically tells Timber what he wants from him. Senbei's only power is his family's money and his own muscle, and those are things whose usefulness is relative. He can only keep spending Brixo's money so long as Brixo lets him, and so long as people can be swayed by it. Even in the Black Rabbit route, Senbei is encountering people who won't be swayed by money or charm, and his strength? Well, just one game over, Syrup is defeating the most powerful witch ever to exist with just an energy drink and a lot of kicking nerds in the nose! The shock collar is the closest thing Senbei will get to having the power that really counts in this universe. Arguing with Timber is the only way he gets to feel powerful. Even in the Black Rabbit route, rather than chasing Timber down, he's explaining all the ways he caught him, like he has to be Sherlock Holmes telling the killer how he figured it all out. He's just a pathetic wretch of a man. It's actually a very well done racism allegory because it accurately replicates the way in which one group has cajoled themselves into power and seeded bullshit to create a hierarchy, and then hierarchies within hierarchies, especially since it works off blatant lies. The prey-predator dynamics are entirely fictitious. The vast majority of animals deemed predators don't actually hunt. They prefer to buy their food, and a lot of them are vegetarians anyway. Most people don't think twice about eating chickens, but Timber explicitly recognizes it as something dying so he can eat. In the final chapter of Lonely Wolf Tree, there's an organization trying to free chickens from what is unquestionably a genocide, and that organization is run entirely by predators. Wolves and foxes and jackals don't kill unless they absolutely have to. As much as Timber takes enjoyment out of a sort of proxy vengeance, if food wasn't a problem, he wouldn't have a reason to keep going out. Timber loves his family way more than he enjoys making rabbits flee to their deaths. Meanwhile, violence against wolves is Frosting's entire identity. They don't have a culture outside of, a wolf. The story doesn't pretend both sides are equal. It is firmly staked aside and isn't moving. Timber is treated with a level of nuance and care that I've never seen characters in his position treated with, and it doesn't give the oppressor any wiggle room. Even rabbits supposedly not doing anything are still living on stolen land in a place that glorifies ethnic cleansing and genocide. Enjoying the benefits from racial violence is not separate from committing it, it is a very important component to racial violence. I was not expecting a game that bills itself as the game where the hot, evil, fluffy boy fucks you to lay down a winning hand in deconstructing ethnic cleansing and genocide in a way that feels eerily well-timed, but it also covers codependency, family, obsession, possessiveness, acrimonious lust, and insecurity excellently as well. But on reflection, if anyone was going to take a stack of ideas that have all in the past produced terrible games and make all of them work as a unified whole, stick the landing, and do a little pirouette just to show off, it was going to be Nabi. Just goes to show you that there are no bad ideas. And now I'm left with one problem. How the fuck do I even recommend this game? Oh hey, do you want to see probably one of the best games to ever deal with ethnic cleansing as a subject? Well, just fuck this dog first.
And I know that you mean me so well, but I